how my boyfriend abandoned me to marry a stranger after 13 years of relationships. It started on a night I can't forget, no matter how much I've tried to bury it. I remember sitting in our small living room, the one we decorated together, with hand-me-down furniture and little trinkets we picked up over the years. Like that chipped ceramic cat from the flea market that always sat by the window. We'd been together for 13 years, practically growing into adults side by side. I met him when I was 19, young and stupid, thinking love was just about late-night calls and butterflies in the stomach. Over the years, I watched us build something that, at least to me, felt unshakable. We talked about marriage all the time, sometimes in passing, sometimes in long, teary conversations after weddings we attended together. He always said, "You know you're the one, I know it. It's just timing." And I believed him. I waited through job changes, financial struggles, even when he had to move to another city for a year because of work. I stayed. Because 13 years meant something. You don't pour that much of your life into a person unless you're certain they're your forever. But that night, when he came home with an odd silence hanging over him, I felt something shift. He didn't kiss me like usual. Didn't even ask what I cooked. He just sat down, scrolling his phone with this strange detached look on his face, as if I wasn't even in the room. And that's when the pit in my stomach started forming. The kind of dread that gnaws quietly but doesn't let go. At first, I thought I was overthinking. I told myself he was just tired, stressed about work, or maybe we were slipping into that stage of comfort where couples don't need to constantly chatter. But days turned into weeks and the cracks began to widen. He started coming home late, mumbling excuses about team hangouts or traffic, but his shirt sometimes smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. His phone became an extension of his body, always flipped upside down on the table, never out of reach, always locked. When I reached for it once, half-jokingly saying, "What are you hiding?" he snatched it back so fast I froze. The man I knew, the one who used to let me scroll through his playlists and joke about embarrassing selfies, was suddenly guarding his screen like it contained state secrets. I tried to confront him gently, asking if he was okay, if we were okay, and he'd sigh and brush me off with a tight smile. "You worry too much? Stop making problems out of nothing." But the distance kept growing. Nights, when he used to curl up beside me, he'd roll to the far edge of the bed, scrolling endlessly until he thought I was asleep. I could feel something unraveling, but I clung desperately to the hope that after 13 years, he couldn't, just throw us away. I told myself couples go through phases. I told myself I just needed to be patient. But patience has a way of turning into denial, and deep down, I already knew the truth was darker than I wanted to face. The truth hit me like a car crash on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. I was sorting laundry, one of those mundane chores that usually leaves your mind blank, when I found a receipt tucked into his jeans pocket. It was from a jewelry store. A diamond ring. My heart raced, not with joy but confusion, because if he had bought me a ring, I would have known. He wasn't the type to hide surprises well. He always blurted out birthday gifts before the actual day. My hands shook as I stared at the slip of paper, the date stamped just a week earlier. 1,000 thoughts flew through my head. Maybe he was planning a proposal. Maybe this was finally it after 13 years. But then, why the secrecy? The lies, the perfume? That night when he came home, I couldn't hold it in. I asked him directly, holding the receipt like a weapon. His face drained of color, and instead of smiling or laughing nervously, he went cold. "It's not what you think," he muttered, but his eyes betrayed him. They weren't guilty eyes of someone caught planning a surprise. They were terrified eyes, cornered. That was when he dropped the bomb he was marrying someone else. A woman he had met just months ago. Someone his family apparently approved of. My ears rang so loudly I barely heard him explain that it was complicated, that it was for the best. He said he didn't want to hurt me, as if stabbing me in the chest after 13 years was somehow painless. I remember sinking onto the couch, the same couch we'd picked out together, staring at him like he was a stranger. And maybe he was. Because the man who once swore he'd never leave me had already left long before that conversation. The weeks that followed were a blur of humiliation and heartbreak. Friends called me confused, asking why they saw photos of him smiling beside a woman they didn't recognize, dressed in wedding attire I'd never been told about. I felt like a fool, like the punchline of some cruel joke. 13 years of birthdays, holidays, inside jokes, and whispered promises had been erased, replaced by glossy photos of him kissing another woman, a stranger in front of everyone. His family, who had once embraced me, acted like I'd never existed. They didn't answer my calls. They avoided me in public. It was as if I'd been scrubbed out of his history, a ghost that no one dared acknowledge. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake in the dark, replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for signs I missed. Had he been unhappy all along? Did he ever love me? Or was I just a placeholder until someone better came along? I oscillated between rage and despair, wanting to smash every reminder of him in our apartment, but also clinging to them, because they were proof I hadn't imagined it all. My friends tried to comfort me, saying I deserved better, that he was trash, but their words felt hollow. They hadn't invested 13 years. They hadn't built their adult life around one person, only to have it ripped away overnight. The betrayal wasn't just his, it was mine too, for trusting so blindly, for giving every piece of myself to someone who didn't see me as his forever. The last time I saw him was at the grocery store weeks after his wedding. I wasn't prepared. I was just grabbing milk hair unwashed, wearing an old hoodie. He walked in with her, the stranger, who was now his wife, their fingers laced like they'd been together forever. She looked polished, radiant, the kind of woman who probably never doubted her place in his life. For a second, our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of something. Shame, maybe, or just discomfort. But he didn't stop. He didn't say a word. He just tightened his grip on her hand and kept walking. That was when it truly sank in. 13 years of my life were nothing more than a chapter he closed without warning, without remorse. I left the store empty-handed, sat in my car, and sobbed until my throat burned. But in that ugly, gut-wrenching moment, I realized something. He had abandoned me, yes, but he hadn't destroyed me. I was still here, breathing, hurting, but alive. One day the pain will dull. One day the memories won't haunt me like ghosts. And maybe one day I'll find someone who understands that love isn't disposable. But tonight, as I type this out to strangers on the internet, I still feel the raw sting of betrayal like an open wound that refuses to close. And I can't help but wonder, how do you ever learn to trust again after the person you gave your entire heart to throws it away for a stranger?